Hello everyone, this is Melodic Oak, and today I'm here to talk a bit about Cube World, specifically the beta, which has just recently come out, and eventually the full release, which is coming out here, well, it's right around the corner on the 30th of September, which, depending on when I release this video, is probably going to be in the next couple of days. So kind of working on a tight timeline here and trying to make something that people can use to get to know the game before it comes out if they're interested in playing it. Maybe kind of figure out if it's for them and how how to play it if you're interested in playing it. And that's kind of what this video is going to be. It's a bit of a tutorial. So to start from the top, it's sort of like an RPG, an action RPG. It's nothing like Minecraft, even though a lot of people have made that comparison. Even visually, it's quite different. Everything is made out of cubes, but they're much smaller. It is a true voxel game, and it's really gorgeous to look at. It's got a great aesthetic to it. Gameplay-wise, it's not for everyone, and we're going to kind of go into that and kind of see if it's for you, and also explain how to play. So, kind of from the top, you're going to be presented with the character creation screen. When you make your character, you're going to have a number of choices. The one that really matters is the class. Everything else is purely aesthetic. There are 4 classes in the game: Warrior, Ranger, Mage, and Rogue. And these 4 classes all play very differently. They also have different subclasses. There's 2 subclasses for each class. You'll kind of default to one. You can change the other. You can change to the other by going to a guild in any town, the little icon with the crown in the minimap. You'll talk to them, and you can just switch over between either of these at any time with no drawback or cost. Most of the subclasses are pretty easy to pick up on if you play the other default subclass enough. For example, Water Mage can heal allies, Ninja for the Rogue relies more on dodgy hit and run tactics, and ranged attacks rather than poison, and so on. I might make another video that covers the subclasses in a little more detail, but if I'm being perfectly honest with you, playing the default class will kind of teach you how to play the whole class, and the subclass really doesn't differ too terribly much. There are also different races to choose from: human, elf, dwarf, orc, goblin, lizard, undead, and frogmen. These have no effect on gameplay, but I mean, come on, you have to choose frogman. So first is the warrior. The warrior's main attack is a 3-hit combo where he or she swings whatever they're holding. The last attack, the uppercut in the 3-hit combo, can stun the opponent. So this is useful to remember. Each hit is going to charge your MP, which can then be used to charge up your secondary hit with mouse 2 called Smash. You charge that up, your MP will kind of fill up with this, with purple instead of blue, and then you let go, and it'll expend however much MP you charged into an attack and deal damage depending on how much MP you just spent. It's best used when your MP is like 90 to 100. Occasionally, you will turn red and be able to instantly charge Smash, which means you'll just press mouse 2 and you'll use up all of your MP. It's very useful to wait to use your Smash until you're fully charged up, but it's not always a possibility in combat. Mouse 3 by default is used to dodge attacks when you're moving around. This can be pretty useful. You can dodge 4 times before your stamina needs to sort of fully recharge, or at least you have enough stamina to dodge 4 times straight in a row, unless this changes. And it'll sort of recharge over time naturally, so don't be afraid to just use it during combat to avoid big enemy attacks, or to get out of the fray if there's just too much hitting you at the time. Now, using mouse 3 while you're stationary will do something different based on your class. For the warrior, it will slam down wherever your crosshairs are, and slam and deal damage, and potentially stun the enemies it hits, and has a pretty high stun chance. However, it will use up 100% of your stamina to do this. And finally, the R button on your keyboard is by default your ultimate. This is your rock fist. It will dash forward quite a distance and damage and stun everything it hits along the way. Now, ultimate cooldowns are pretty long, so be careful kind of when you choose to do this. Next on the list we have Ranger. Ranger's main attack repeatedly fires arrows and charges MP with all the damage that it deals. Mouse 2 will expend that and fire a salvo, a bunch of arrows for a bunch of damage, and occasionally these arrows will also stun. Holding down left shift will build up your stealth until it maxes out, and if you have a lot of stealth, enemies won't be able to see you. You'll literally be able to walk right up to them and they won't attack you. It's really nice. However, you do move more slowly while you're sneaking. However, while you're stealthed, your MP will naturally charge instead of drain. This can be pretty useful, especially for when you're looking to initiate combat. Tapping mouse 3, of course, will dodge as usual, but if you're stationary, it will retreat, jumping you a very long distance backwards and immediately and instantly giving you stealth. Keep in mind that stealth does not help you against enemies that are already engaging you. It only helps you in keeping enemies that haven't targeted you yet from targeting you. Keep that in mind. And finally, your ultimate is Shadow Shooter, which summons a clone that fights alongside you for a short time. This can be pretty useful, particularly if you're playing solo, because the ranger is a ranged combatant. This can be pretty difficult in single player, where you don't have people to kind of go up close and tank for you. So your ultimate's going to be your bread and butter for surviving a lot of different combat situations you get into, especially early on as the ranger. Now the rogue works similarly to the ranger in that they also make heavy use of stealth. However, their sort of innate gameplay style is very different. So holding down mouse 1, of course, uses your normal attack like everyone else. The rogue's normal attack is just constant swings with their weapon, 1 or 2 of them. The rogue, I would say, excels when it's using 2 single-handed weapons for those rapid attacks. That way, your rogue is going to charge up MP really fast, and because, in my opinion and in my experience, the rogue does not deal a lot of damage with their attacks, your bread and butter with the rogue's sort of first subclass is going to be poisoning your enemies. So after you build up MP, you'll use mouse 2 to use a kick. A high damage strike that poisons the enemy uses up all your MP. It engages instantly, it doesn't require charging, and it can hit a bunch of enemies if you have enemies clustered in front of you. It's very handy. You can also occasionally stun. Left shift sneaks just like the ranger does, and mouse 3 while you're standing still doesn't retreat like the ranger. Instead, it throws a poison vial to wherever you're currently aiming. It's a pretty large AoE that instantly poisons your enemies. It's a pretty good way to start a combat, to start a battle. I particularly like to sort of combo it with your ultimate, which is called Camouflage. Seems weak at first, but it's actually one of the strongest ultimates in the game in my personal opinion. Activating it will immediately stealth you to 100% stealth and keep you that way for roughly about 20 seconds. The cooldown's, I think, about 40 seconds, so it can be used pretty often, and you're gonna be using it pretty often. Not just to get around, but remember, when you're stealthed, your MP goes up instead of down, meaning that using it during combat means you're going to get even more MP. That stacks with your constant mouse 1 attacking. So, going Camouflage, throwing a poison vial, waiting for your enemies to get up close to you, by then you'll have full MP, you can unleash a kick, and then just wail on them. It's very strong. Now, the Mage is interesting. The Mage probably plays most differently from all the other classes. The Mage's main attack is Fire Swirl, which does light damage in a small area. Mouse 2 is Fire Vortex. It's basically like Fire Swirl, but bigger and does more damage. It uses up 30 of your MP. Now this is where it gets interesting. When you're playing Mage, you might realize that you have 100 MP pretty much all the time. That's because you don't build MP. Instead, you expend it and it automatically charges up instead of down. Now, left shift is going to float you, which is, again, pretty different from the other classes. And using mouse 1 while you're floating will use Fire Explosion, an AoE centered on yourself using 50 of your MP. It's pretty good if you're like panicking and you need to deal with stuff that's surrounding you. I highly recommend it as sort of a panic button. And finally, your ult is Fire Missiles. It's going to fire missiles to wherever your mouse cursor is, or wherever your crosshair is currently pointing. Another thing that the Mage can do is teleport. When you press mouse 3 and you have full MP, then you will teleport to wherever you're aiming your crosshair. Now keep in mind you have to be standing still to do this. If you're moving, you'll just use your normal dodge. Now that we've kind of covered the classes, to kind of talk about one of the biggest parts of Cube World, one of the biggest parts that's going to make or break the game for a lot of people, and in fact has already made or broke the game for a lot of people. There's a lot of division about this design choice, and personally I didn't like it at first, and now that I've actually played it, I do like it. So it's going to be really subjective, honestly, but progression works very differently in Cube World to a lot of other games. There are no traditional levels. There's no experience points. Instead, you're going to gain power through 2 different primary methods. The main one is going to be through gear. Now, you'll get better gear just as you kill enemies. They'll drop them all the time. In fact, you probably won't have too much trouble finding them if you're killing the enemies that you should be fighting at the time. Another good way to find gear is to buy it in shops. You'll get gold as you play, and you can also upgrade yourself that way. But gear is going to give you more stars, which you can see if you press B to open up your inventory. In the top left, you're going to see an average sort of... First of all, you're going to see a big breakdown of all of your stats, but you're also going to see an average power level in terms of your offensive and defensive power in stars. Now, those 5 stars follow the 5 different rarity levels that Cube World uses, both in its items and its enemies. And these power levels of yours are going to tell you roughly what level of enemies you can fight. The different colors kind of follow the same color coding as pretty much any other major RPG, say like World of Warcraft. White is common, and then you have green, and then you have blue, and then you have purple, and then finally you have sort of that goldish orange legendary color. Enemies' names are going to be also color coded like this. If you don't have the gear of that same color coding, you're going to have a tough time fighting that enemy. The general rule of thumb is fighting enemies below your gear level is going to be really easy. Fighting enemies equal to you is going to be it's pretty easy most of the time, but at the beginning of the game might be a little more difficult. And finally, on average, I would say you can generally pretty consistently fight an enemy 1 rarity level up from your gear level, as long as you're not right at the start of the game with your default stuff. But in pretty much any other situation, you can fight an enemy pretty consistently up to 1 rarity above you. And if you're really good, maybe 2 rarities above you, but I would use caution until you really know what you're doing. Now, besides gear, there's another way to progress, and that is sort of baked into the way the world sort of generates. So if you open up your map by pressing M and then scroll out with your mouse wheel to zoom all the way out, you'll see that the game map is broken up into different regions. Each of these regions is broken up into kingdoms, which is sort of a collection of multiple regions. Now, the regions are what's really important here. In each region, there's going to be a number of things that you can do to increase your sort of viability in that region, your strength. In order to do them, you're going to have to talk to people and unlock quests. Talk to everyone you see, by the way. Talk to everyone at least once. They're going to give you sort of map locations and quests in a sort of sense, and you'll be able to look on the map and find them and go to them and do something. A lot of these will give you cool stuff. And a lot of them you're going to see in every region. Like, every region's going to have a quest to unlock the different special items, of which there are several. Hang glider, boat, divine harp, sky whistle, climbing claws, reins, and several books of crafting. Every single area is going to have its own sort of instance of these, and you're going to have to get them again when you go to a new region. Just like your gear. Your gear, and this is a big point of contention with a lot of people, does not translate from one region to another. If you take your gear into one region, it's not going to be as good as it was in another region. Now, for some people this is okay, for other people not so much. However, there is a way to offset this. The more you complete a region, the more things you do, and the more of a completionist you are, you're going to start seeing more and more items of a plus quality drop. It's going to be at the end of the name of the item. Now, these items can be taken into another region with either no or little change in their statistics. So if you really want to be a completionist and spend your time in a region, you can get some okay gear that you can take into the next region to help you kind of start out in that region and complete it quicker. Now, I think this is really awesome because it basically makes the game infinitely replayable. You're always going to have stuff to do. Of course, the downside is a lot of the strength you gain in one region is not going to completely translate to another, but it does partially, and I like that. So, to each their own. Some are going to like it, some are going to hate it, but that's just kind of how it works. Special items, you're definitely going to want to get quests for these early on and complete them as quickly as possible. All these things are going to help you just sort of do things more efficiently. Like the hang glider allows you to hang glide, the boat allows you to travel over water more quickly, the sky whistle is pretty important because it allows you to play it at eagle statues, which will take you up to a particularly powerful item in that region. Divine harp is used to sort of lower barriers that are blocking you from getting artifacts. Climbing claws allow you to climb any surface without using stamina. Normally you can climb by jumping at it and pressing E, and then you'll sort of latch onto it and can climb around. And you can even wall jump off of a surface. However, doing all this takes stamina. Normally, climbing claws help with this. You can also get reins, which, as long as you're in that region, will allow you to ride your pets. More on that in a moment. And finally, there are books of crafting. These books of crafting will allow you to craft items of the appropriate recipe to the book in that region. Of course, there are 5 books of crafting to any region, 1 for every rarity. There is also a number of gnomes in a region. These gnomes will have been captured or being held prisoner in some way, and you have to go and rescue them. Each one you rescue will unlock a whole new sort of tier of items available in all the villages' shops in that region. So if you want to buy better gear, saving those gnomes is going to be important. So that's basically how you progress. You're going to want to kill lots of enemies, get a lot of gold and a lot of item drops. You're going to want to pick up everything. Everything you see on the ground that you have room to pick up, pick it up. There's no reason not to. As far as I'm aware, there is no backpack limit. And you can sell everything that you're not going to use. You'll occasionally get these items called leftovers of different rarity colors. You can take these back into town, find the place that looks like the little hourglass on the minimap, go into that shop, and you can spend a very small amount of gold to get the leftovers identified. They will be identified as an item of the same rarity that they were color-coded to. This is a great way to get better gear. A lot of leftovers tend to be pretty good gear, so definitely always pick these up and get these ID'd. You're going to get a lot of gear that doesn't work for your class. If you're playing with other people, you can always give those items to them. If you're not, you can always sell them for some extra gold. You can never have enough gold, you're going to need it. Gold is spent on lots of things besides just items. You can also use it on crafting items, like certain ingredients you're going to need to make potions and the like, which we're going to get into now. Crafting is a big part of the game. As with a lot of RPGs of this style, in order to craft certain things, you might need to be in a certain place or location. For example, there's a lot of food items in the game, which are items that you'll sit down and eat to heal. You can't do this really during combat very effectively, but it's pretty helpful for healing between fights. In order to make food, you're generally going to need a fireplace. So in order to find a fireplace, you just kind of have to go and look for one. They're scattered throughout the world. There's a lot of them, so it's not going to take you too long to find one. So my recommendation is whenever you see one, go ahead and stop, use it, cook everything that you need to, and then be on your way. You can also mark them on your map. If you have your map open, you can press mouse 3 by default and put a little star on wherever your mouse cursor is. This is great for marking locations of interest, using it as waypoints for this is where I want to go next, or for marking things like I just said, like fire pits or other things you want to keep track of. Unfortunately, there's no way to name them yet. I hope that's a feature that's put in, but at least for now, it's a useful way to remind yourself that there's a point of interest where you put the star. One of the most important things you're going to be crafting are healing potions. There's something you can consume while moving, which is something you're going to need to be doing in combat. Healing potions also heal a lot more per second than food does, so you're going to want to keep a number of these with you at any given time. Really, I'd recommend keeping as many as you possibly can with you at all times. Now, in order to craft a healing potion, you're going to need a bottle. You're going to need to then fill that bottle with water, which you can do as long as you're inside any body of water, including a well. Go ahead and hold down the little hammer icon in the crafting screen, which you can access with C. When you hold it down, don't worry, it's not going to take as long as it looks. That crafting speed will speed up the longer you hold it down, so don't worry. I also recommend leaving maybe a few of your bottles not filled with water, because there's another kind of potion you can make with cacti that requires bottles without any water in them, and you can't empty them once you fill them. Yeah, I know, it's kind of silly. There's also some buff potions you can make. There's 4 of them. One's going to buff your health, one's going to buff your defense, one's going to buff your offense, and one's going to buff your resistances, which is going to make you more resistant to like magic and poison and the like. Pretty much anything that's not straight up damage. Very useful for fighting mages, which can be very annoying out there in the world. You're going to learn to be terrified by mages with laser beams. Trust me. Now that you know how to craft, another important part of surviving in Cube World is going to be surviving the nighttime. Cube World has a day and night cycle. They're pretty long. They're not like, say, Minecraft, where it goes by in 20 minutes or so. They're pretty long. I'm not exactly sure exactly how long. I might put that up on screen if I can find out. But they're pretty lengthy, and that means that nighttime is going to last a long time as well. And it's extremely dark. It's like real nighttime dark. And yes, you do have a lantern that you can get out by pressing F, but it's going to have a minimal impact on how well you can see until you get a better lantern, which I don't even know if it exists in the beta or full release. I haven't actually found one yet, but in the alpha, you could get better ones, so here's hoping. but it's not going to do a whole lot for you anyway. My recommendation is to find a bed. You can find sleeping bags out in the wild that you can use to speed up the passage of time. You can just look at the time in the top right corner, and it will actually go faster as long as you're lying down. However, a much more efficient way to do it is to go to a town, go to the inn, talk to the innkeeper, and ask them to stay the night. It's going to cost you 10 gold, and it will immediately fast forward it to the morning. It's extremely useful. It's worth the 10 gold, trust me. Now let's talk about pets. I mentioned them briefly before, and they're one of my favorite parts of Cube World. They always have been. It's amazing. There are a ton of different pets that you can have, a long list. The Cube World wiki has a list of them, including a page called Pet Food. This will explain to you what different pet foods you need to tame different pets. In your inventory, there is a pet tab where you can see all of your captured pets, or tamed pets rather, as well as all of your pet foods. Go ahead and click on a pet food and you'll hold it out in front of you. If the pet, well, at this point, the creature that you're holding it out to can be tamed with that food, they'll get a heart above their head. Just wait for them to finish eating it. The item will be consumed and they'll become your pet. It's really awesome. They'll follow you around, they'll respawn if they die, so don't worry too much about them, and they're just generally helpful to have around. They'll do a little bit of tanking for you, they'll fight for you, they'll die really often. Really, they're not too helpful in gameplay terms, but they're really cute and adorable and awesome to have around. Some pets have the rideable tag, meaning that yes, you can ride them. However, you'll have to get the reins in that area, in that region, in order to ride them. Once you do, it's a nice quick way to get around if you're traveling on the ground, kind of like traveling in the water is for the boat. It's much, much quicker. The hang glider much quicker traveling through the air than just falling or floating, so yeah, they all have their uses. Last but not least, an important part to talk about in Cube World is the lore. As you go to certain historical sites and locations in your Cube World region, you'll rack up something called lore. In the bottom right, you'll be able to see a percentage increase every single time you do so. The higher your lore is, the more often you'll see artifact locations appear on your map. That's pretty much the only practical use it has in-game, other than just being kind of awesome, procedurally generated lore content, kind of similar to Dwarf Fortress. It's pretty cool, I'm gonna be honest. Well, that just about does it for a basic Cube World overview and tutorial. I hope that was enough to get you started. I really think it should be. Really, this game doesn't do a great job of explaining itself. It doesn't really have any built-in or baked-in tutorials yet, so really all you need to know is these basics in order to get started. The rest of it will come pretty naturally. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll catch you next time.